Yes, we will get to the story of how he went from the couch to building what he built. But there's something much bigger in terms of the master class that is being offered to you in this moment, where Lewis is going to save you the almost 13 years, was it? How long was it? 2 decades or whatever of pain that he put himself through to get to the wisdom and the greatness that he has unlocked in himself. Because I've known Lewis for 5 years. He is a different human being than even just a year ago. And I think that it is possible, and Lewis will tell you this, to be a competitive motherfucker and to compete at the highest levels, which he does.
Yeah. I still like to win.
Hell yes.
But it's a win-win. You know,
Yes.
it's a different type of win.
And to be a calm, cool, and confident person because you have peace with yourself
Yeah.
as you are doing those things.
And even just to comment on what you said about paying bills, I don't think you can have financial peace unless you have inner peace. Because there's so many people that you know that have lots of money who are overly stressed.
Right.
And more money doesn't always solve every problem. It solves lots of problems, but
Yep.
it doesn't always solve the problem of accepting and loving yourself.
That's true. And I'm going to add something to that. Because both Lewis and I have been in moments of our life, and ironically, it was during 2007 and 2008, where neither one of us were able to buy groceries. We did not have any savings. We did not have any income. We were relying on other people to help us get through. And the stress that you feel when you cannot pay for your basic needs is a toxic level of stress that can consume you. But what I also want you to consider is the added stress and shame and mental beatdown that you add on top of that reality doesn't help you pay your bills either.
100%.
And so whether you are at a point where you've been wildly successful, but you're deeply unhappy, or you're at a point where you're having trouble paying your bills, cultivating a sense of peace inside yourself, an assuredness that you can rely on yourself, a steadiness so that the world around you does not trip you up emotionally, that is a superpower. That's part of this greatness mindset that you're talking about. And Lewis has been on this profound healing journey. And so I want to go there.
The game is healing.
The game is healing.
The game is healing in order to, create anything in my mind.
What does healing even mean, Lewis?
I used to feel a lot of pain in my chest or tightness in my throat or disturbance in my stomach. I used to feel like I couldn't sleep at night because I was up for an hour and a half, like ruminating or thinking and stressed. I used to be very reactive when my nervous system was triggered.
Yep.
I feel like that's the opposite of healing. Healing is learning how to overcome all those things so your nervous system is in peace when there's chaos around you. It doesn't mean I'm not going to feel triggered momentarily or feel like, oh, I don't like that, or react to a thing or feel disturbed. But it's learning how to recognize it much faster and from a place of integrating healing and lessons, be able to respond differently when there's a disturbance, as opposed to based on a wound. So most of my life, I was just reacting, responding based on wounds that I was unaware of. Or maybe I was aware of them, but I was just like, this is who I am. Don't mess with me.
Oh, how many of us have heard that?
Yeah, don't try to change me. Don't mess with me. Like, this is who I am. I'm fine.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with me. Like this, reaction. And
can you give people a sense that don't know? You've wrote about this extensively in your New York Times bestseller, The Mask of Masculinity. And you talk about this on your podcast, but can you give people a sense of some of the things that needed healing? So I'm going to just point out one of them. So being in a classroom where you cannot do cognitively because of a learning difference. You and I both have dyslexia. Yours seems to be probably more profound than mine.
Even reading my own words, I trip up sometimes because I still have to practice reading slowly and with a cadence.
So what was that like for me to pass the book to you?
I was even going to say it. I was like, this is I get to practice my insecurities all the time. I have to read on a teleprompter all the time. And I'm always like, just take a deep breath and know that I'm not going to be the best reader in the world. And that's okay. And so I just say, you know what? I accept myself when I stutter. I accept myself when I stumble. I accept myself when I have to redo a sentence over and over again because I wasn't able to see what's coming next and it just didn't sound right. It probably takes me twice as long to read my audiobook as you do, right? But I used to hate myself for that and beat myself up. And now I accept and love myself. And when I do that, I notice I read a lot better and I flow a lot better. And it's not perfect or anything, but I'm like, it's just, I save a lot more time. I'm more relaxed. And as opposed to, I used to beat myself up and be the biggest critic. Now I'm just a positive self-coach in those moments. I'm just like, oh, you got this. Oh, it's okay. You'll
Can
do
we
it.
unpack that for a minute? Because I think it's a really relatable example. So every one of us has something that we're self-conscious about or that we beat ourselves up about, whether it's our weight or something about our skin or our hair or our height or, for you mentioned stuttering and stumbling and reading out loud or being slower at something. And you so beautifully talked about how you used to just beat the hell out of yourself. You hated that about yourself. How did you, Lewis, learn to accept something you hated? How do you fucking do that?
There's many different modalities of
What worked for you?
Of healing.
Right.
And I feel like over the last 10 years, I was telling your husband, Chris, about this. I was like, because he was asking me about all these different things.
Right.
And I was like, I feel like I've tried lots of different stuff because I got a lot of work to do. So I'm willing to dive in and like take a look in the mirror and say, tell me what to do and I'll try it. And I did workshops, emotional intelligence, leadership training workshops 10 years ago that helped me unlock and open up about sexual trauma. That was kind of stage one. It was one of my biggest shames that I didn't want to talk about. I didn't want anyone to know about because if anyone knew that I'd been sexually abused, I thought no one would ever love me. So it was a huge protection that a shield that I was putting up on myself to show people that I was strong, to show people that I was confident, to show people that no one could mess with me in sports or whatever it might be. And that supported me in accomplishing certain results, but hurt me in feeling loved and harmony and alignment within myself. And so it was exhausting. It's draining. It's an emotional train wreck because you're kind of living a double life. Inside, you know the truth. Outside, others don't know the truth about you. So you're hiding something.
And, I want to point something out about this because we've been doing a whole series on trauma and nervous system repair. And you talked earlier about how your lived experience, even though you're super successful on the outside, is like knot in the stomach, tightness in the chest, something in the throat. You don't even have to be conscious about the fact that you're hiding this thing. It's not like you're walking
Right.
around thinking about the fact that you were a victim of sexual abuse. It's that it's stored in your body.
Yeah.
So your body operates in a state all the time as if something bad's about to happen.
I wasn't even like aware that I wasn't telling people. I was just like, trying to block it and cover it up constantly.
Yeah.
But it was always in my mind. Like maybe every few days, the memory would come up in some way. It was just like a movie that was repeating on repeat. And when I did this first workshop, a lot of things started to happen in my life where I was having breakdowns, intimate relationship, business partnership, just life. I just felt like, man, stuff is breaking down all around me. Although I'm successful, why are all these things breaking down? I'm the common denominator. A friend of mine was like, I actually got in a fight on a basketball court. This was kind of the tipping point where I was the perfect storm. And a friend of mine who was there was like, I don't want to hang out with you anymore if you're going to keep reacting in this way. Because I was the same fun-loving guy, but when I would get triggered, I was like, this reaction would come out of me.
Like you get like super physical, like a linebacker kind
I would
of
just
thing?
like try to defend myself energetically. But if someone was physically trying to attack me, which in a basketball game is kind of
Isn't that part of the game?
yes, but I would take it so personally. So when there was a cheap elbow, I'd be like, turn around and be like, let's go, let's fight. So I didn't have the filter because I felt like someone was always trying to abuse me or take
because they
advantage of me.
had.
Exactly. And so this was kind of the last thing that happened. I got in this fight and my friend was like, hey, I don't want to hang out with you. I don't want to play basketball anymore with you if you're going to react like this. And it was a tendency that was happening for many months, more and more, until this like fist fight came
Fist
about.
fight?
Fist fight.
On
yeah.
a basketball court?
On a pickup basketball court. Yeah,
Lewis.
there was no stakes on the line. It was just like a friendly game in the mean streets of Beverly Hills. Yeah. And
How old
and
were you?
I was 10 years ago. Yeah. It was
So how
10
old are
years
you
ago.
now?
I'm 39.
39.
I
So
was
when you're
29.
29 years old.
And I remember there was a police station right across the street. It was in West Hollywood. It was 10 minutes away from here. And I remember going home after this. Well, I remember seeing the guy's face when it was done and being really scared of what I'd done. Now,
Meaning,
his face didn't look good. I'll just say that. And I always had this rule that I'll never hit someone unless they hit me first. That was kind of like my thing. But I'll freaking get in someone's face. I'll talk trash, whatever. But I was like, I'll never hit someone unless they hit me first. He ended up headbutting me because we were like kind of in each other's faces, and he headbutts me. And then I kind of just go blank.
Yeah.
And I turn into like the Incredible Hulk.
Yeah.
In that moment. Like, this guy hit me. There's no rules. And afterwards, I had so much adrenaline because I don't think I'd gotten in an actual fight since I was like 13, right? So I played football to get my aggression out, but then I no longer was able to hit people legally, right? And so this was a point where this happened, and I remember going home and looking at myself in the mirror and being like, "Who are you?" I did not recognize myself, and I was really kind of like shaking because I was like, "What am I doing? Like, who am I? Why are you reacting?" I always started to like ask myself this question. And I remember thinking like, I have too much to lose now to allow my anger, my fears, my wounds to be in control.
Yeah.
Because I had built a business, and I was like, what if someone had a knife or a gun or whatever, like, or I injured myself in a worse way, or I hurt someone else? Like, what if something really bad happened? He was ended up fine. We were fine. But I remember thinking, oh, okay, this could really get out of control. And this was nothing. This was like a little incident, and I was so reactive. So that's what got me down the path of saying, let me take a look in the mirror. I asked some friends for some suggestions on what I could do. I went to some workshops. The first workshop I went to got me to a vulnerable enough state to talk about sexual abuse for the first time.
Out loud?
Out loud. First time I
Wow.
spoke the words.
What was that like?
The most terrifying moment of my life, to be honest, because I never thought that this had happened to any other man. So you have to imagine, if you think that what has happened to you has never happened to anyone else, then you think you are wrong, broken, and the worst human being alive.
Yeah.
Now, was my interpretation, right? And I got to a place during this workshop where it was a 5-day experience, and a lot of people were going through it's a leadership workshop, but we have to go into our past and mend things to get clear on what we want for the future and then move towards the future, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a process, a journey of your personal life to help you have more tools of leadership.
Yeah.
And at one point during this workshop, people were open up about different stuff. It was a vulnerable state at this time, but it was like after the 3rd day. The trainer goes, okay, we've gone into these different past experiences, parents and this and that and breakups. We're not talking about the past anymore. We're moving on. We're going into what you want to create for the future. Like, we're done. We're moving forward. But if there's anything you haven't shared, now is the time. Like, if there's anything you haven't shared from the past, now is the time, or we're moving on and you're going to miss your moment. For whatever reason, that voice came back out and was like, okay. And during this time, I started to address all these different things from my childhood. My parents, they probably should have never been married in the first place, but they
Yep.
went through a divorce eventually, and just kind of the fear of their arguments and fights as a young child. That was stressful. My brother went to prison when I was 8 for 4.5 years. So I didn't have friends for 4.5 years because in a small town, the moms wouldn't let their kids hang out with me. So there was just a lonely time, and it was traumatic to go to a prison
Of course.
every weekend and watch your brother in a room full of convicts and their families. It was a traumatic experience for the whole family. Being picked on in school and special needs classes and all these different things, breakups, heartbreak. I was like, okay, I've already addressed this stuff. I feel fine here. But what about this thing that I've been thinking about almost every day for 25 years? And whatever inside of me just said, you have to stand up. And I remember just like standing up and getting out of my seat and walking to the front of the room. And there's probably, 30, 40 people in the room. We're kind of like in a semicircle, and I stand up And this was interesting because I couldn't look anyone in the eyes. I stood up, I like looked down at the carpet, went in front of the room, and just said, when I was 5, I was sexually abused by the babysitter's son. And I went through the entire story of the entire event. It was almost like I was in the bathroom again, reliving it. And I shared this, but I could not look up because I was so ashamed of what I was saying. And I was just thinking to myself, man, everyone's laughing at me. Everyone's like, you know, thinking I'm a loser. Everyone thinking I'm unlovable. All these things came up for me. And I was like, my life is over. Essentially what I was thinking. And I remember sharing this, staring down, like walk through the whole thing. And somehow I was like semi-calm. I was like standing there just maybe because I wasn't looking in anyone's eyes, but I was pretty calm and able to just get through it. I wasn't crying or anything. I was just getting through it. And then I went and sat down, and there was 2 women sitting on either side of me when I sat down. And I remember just looking at one of them, and she's like weeping, and the other one is like holding me. They're crying. Now it's like 25 years of pain just kind of erupts, and I start crying, and they're holding me. They're all kind of like jumping and shaking, like, you know, they're crying uncontrollably. And I'm just like, I have to leave. So I run out of the room. It was in kind of a conference room of like a hotel. Run out of the hotel to get some fresh air. And I'm in the back alley behind this hotel by LAX. And there's a wall. I kind of just put my hand against the wall and I'm just like sobbing. And a few minutes later, I feel a touch on the back of my shoulder. And it's this guy who's bigger than me. He's probably in his late 50s. And he turns me around. He's crying. He looks me in my eyes. He says, "You're my hero. You're my hero. I will follow you anywhere." I vividly remember this. He goes, "I have 3 kids. I've been married for 20-something years. My wife doesn't know. My kids don't know. This happened to me when I was 11. This happened to me multiple times. And I've lived with shame and doubt and insecurities my whole life. Thank you for being the first person to open up in front of me. You're going to give me the courage now to go and tell my wife."
Wow.
All these men from the room started coming out. There was only 2 or 3 guys who had been sexually abused that told me that for the first time, by the way. They hadn't opened up either to anyone in their lives. And then other guys were just like, "I've never heard anything like this. This happened to me. I feel really insecure about this in my life, or this thing I'm ashamed of," right?
Right.
And it was so powerful because I was thinking everyone's going to make fun of me, but in fact, it made them trust me and respect me more and love me more. The thing that was the scariest thing for me was actually the thing that brought me closer to people. And people could actually see me for the first time fully, at least in that regard. And that was the start of 10 years of lots of different healing modalities, which I'm happy to talk about some of them, but that was the start of processing the healing. The next step is integrating the healing, which is where all the work is.
Yeah, that's true. Well, we will get you back to go in and talk about all the modalities, but I want to just say that this is yet another one of those areas where you and I have a parallel path. Because I had a very similar thing happen to me when I was in the 4th grade, and I buried it. And I knew in the back of my mind, somewhere in the back of my mind, that something had happened. And it wasn't until I was at a leadership seminar.
Really?
That was in the
That you started to open
personal
up.
No, well, what happened is somebody else shared. And they shared about how they had been molested, and they had forgiven their parents and forgiven the babysitter. But they couldn't forgive their sister because while this was happening to them in the bathroom, similar to their story, their sister was watching TV.
Oh,
And as she said that, I had a very vivid memory of the moment that it happened to me in the middle of the night. And when I kind of rolled over because I, was scared that this person was on top of me, the first person I saw was my brother because he was sleeping on the bunk bed, like right across. And I thought, I don't want this person to hurt him. So I was just like quiet like a mouse. But it was the sibling connection. And it, like you, just flooded in.
Wow.
And I was like, I got to share this. And for a minute, I questioned whether or not it had happened. And it was
it a bad dream, or was it a reality,
Yes.
or did I block it? Was it real? Yeah.
Yes, but that voice, that knowing, that flood of emotion made me, like you, say, I just have to say it out loud.
And what happened when you said it out loud?
Oh, I just collapsed, sobbing. Same thing as you. Like so many people come up. I mean, it is such, unfortunately, a very common story. 1 in 4 women, 1 in 6 men have experienced something like that. But it's in either the denying that it's real and questioning it, or the shame that you feel around it as if somehow it's your fault,
Yeah.
or it somehow is damaging to you, and carrying that inside, which really is damaging. And so I think that it's an important, thank you, first of all, for sharing that story.
Yeah, of course.
And I think speaking the things that you hate or are ashamed of is a form of acceptance. When I sit here and think about what you're about to experience, I can honestly tell you this is one of the deepest conversations I've ever had with someone that I recorded. And so I'm glad that my guest today agreed to let me share this conversation with you. It's unlike anything you may have heard before, particularly heard a man talking about.